more transformational impact. So we've got an online audience I want to also welcome to the event. And we'll be showcasing the Biodiversity Finance Trends Dashboard. There is a, sorry, what's it called? No, that wasn't it. There is a Slido, and if you want to raise questions, there's an online team that will be answering it in real time, both for the online audience, but also for anyone here in person who wants to ask questions about this dashboard. They're there to help. And we're here to discuss the importance of finance mobilisation in climate and nature. In a time where we're looking at the 1.3 trillion roadmap, as well as the global biodiversity framework targets. And so this analysis has been done to look at the current state of the finance landscape and resource mobilisation. It's critical that we're able to track adaptation finance, mitigation finance, but also biodiversity finance because of how interconnected the climate and nature crises are. And what we found is that when in 2025 we had the promise of 20 billion for biodiversity, we're around 17 billion for biodiversity specific finance, or 30 billion for related finance, which is obviously a much broader category. But we also have the good news that 620 organizations, 620 different corporates who collectively are managing around 20 trillion of assets have committed to report in line with the TFND. There is an issue of quality of data. There is a huge amount of difference in how different governments are doing their own accounting and reporting this data, which makes it challenging. But it's really important, if we're going to tackle the land use transition, that we begin to look at how we bring together the coherence of our spending on adaptation, mitigation and nature, and really understand how they're working together. So one aspect of this is how much is going to nature stewards. And what we're able to find here, and in fact it's pretty much the same number for everyone's analysis in different places, is 1% goes to indigenous peoples out of the total volume. But what another analysis that was I was at an event, moderating another event yesterday, showed that only of that 1%, only 5% is going to women indigenous leaders. So there's a really big issue to look at inclusion, not just in terms of the main flows and how many reaches indigenous people or other forest stewards, but we also need to look at the gender aspects of that. So with that, a few highlights from the report. There is a deep dive report you can find on the dashboard website itself. We want to thank DEFRA for the partnership on developing the dashboard. And really what this is trying to do is increase transparency and accountability around these flows for the global framework, the global biodiversity framework, sorry. But it's also critical to look at how we look at climate finance within that. So I would encourage you to use the dashboard and to look at the report. And I guess the other thing to say is there's a lot of other analyses out there on what's working in these financial approaches. And I think it's really, if we're going to shift the trends here, we're going to have to really look at how we get big finance flows moving. There is a lot of work done around debt refinancing. I was just discussing with one of our panelists. There is a lot of work around projects for permanence, it's called, but basically endowment funds that provide long-term financing around a government's ambition. And I think we've just got to keep innovating and looking for these solutions. But with that, I am delighted to invite the Minister of Nature from the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs in the UK, Mary Cray, to give us an opening remarks on the importance of increasing... Nature's welcoming you to the stage, Mary. You couldn't give a better introduction, an opening or suggestion that this is going to be meaningful remarks. So over to you.
Well, that certainly woke everybody up from the post-lunch slump, didn't it? Thank you very much indeed, Claire. It was brilliant to see your slides there. And here we are at the gateway of the Amazon, literally with the rainforest around us, the heavens opening above us at this critical moment for nature finance. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you to everyone here with us in Pavilion and to those watching us online all around the world. We know in the UK that climate change and nature loss cannot be solved in isolation, and we are so pleased that the Brazilian presidency of COP is putting these two interconnected crises together in this COP. Through UK International Climate Finance, since 2011, an estimated 137 million people have been supported to better adapt to the effects of climate change. Around £21 billion in public and private finance combined has been mobilised, leading to around 145 million tonnes of greenhouse gas emissions being reduced or avoided. This financing has also brought benefits for nature, with an estimated 12 million hectares of land, nearly the size of England, now managed more sustainably. I was delighted that my boss, Emma Reynolds, the DEFRA Secretary of State, launched the latest Biodiversity Finance Trends Dashboard in October at our pre-COP event at the National History Museum with His Majesty the King and the Prince of Wales. I think it's one of the first times that they've been seen together at an event, so we were so thrilled they were both able to come. This year's dashboard shows good progress being made on resource mobilisation since the Convention on Biological Diversity COP15 and the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. But much more, as Claire said, is needed to reach this crucial finance target of $200 billion a year. And as shown on the dashboard, building synergies between nature and climate finance can scale action. So the data shows we are doing well to embed climate outcomes into biodiversity action. We need to work on the reverse or the inverse and ensure that nature outcomes are better mainstreamed into climate action. So at this point, I want to thank you, Claire, because we are so proud of the partnership with your teams, and we're so proud of the third iteration of this dashboard. Last year, TNC gave me the chance to visit a nature-based solution in action in Cali, Colombia. I visited with you the El Hatico Nature Reserve, which has implemented a climate-friendly grazing system for cattle and sheep that supports livelihoods, reduces climate impacts, requires fewer inputs, and promotes much more nature. And finally, I want to touch on the role of the private sector. In June, DEFRA hosted a fantastic event during London Climate Action Week, attended by His Majesty the King at Lancaster House. We had £12 trillion of combined financial firepower in that room, alongside with practitioners on the ground, making the case for investing in nature and showing the different pathways to get there. Now, I recognise the demands on the private sector. As policymakers, our job is to set a clear direction and remove barriers so businesses can confidently invest in nature, and that's why we're investing in our BSI nature standards. And I'm delighted that we are seeing a shift in the private sector's attitude towards nature through rising through the task force on nature-related financial disclosure, so through increasing that uptake and increasing that interest in nature markets. And we look forward to the business and biodiversity nexus assessment being revealed in Manchester when we host the independent panel on biodiversity and ecosystems in Manchester early next year. But I also today have a very new and exciting announcement to make. I'm delighted that the first contribution to the Cali Fund has been made. The Cali Fund is the benefit sharing mechanism for the private sector agreed last year in Cali by parties to the CBD. And I'm even more delighted to say that the first company to step up and step forward is a small UK startup called Tierra Viva AI. Their bold move breaks the ice and paves the way for others to follow. And we now look for more companies to make meaningful contributions. It's not always easy to be the first, so we're very grateful that Tierra Viva has made that first move. I'm so grateful. We've made a quick update to the dashboard to reflect this news. And let me conclude by saying that while finance is increasing, we must keep up the momentum and keep the focus on delivering better outcomes for nature, for our forests, the lungs of the world, for the oceans, the circulation system of the world, and the land, which is in some ways the skin of the world. Our livelihoods and economies depend on a stable climate and thriving natural ecosystems. In the UK, we have drought in Yorkshire, floods in Wales, and snow in London today. 3 seasons in one day. We must not put in jeopardy the progress we have made on the climate. Nature is essential to prosperity and security. I'm looking forward to hearing from the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Minister. And if I could invite the rest of my panel to come and join me up here. We're going to go through a quick series of interventions. So, starting with Jens Sedemund, who is the Director of the Environment and Climate Change team at OECD, to give us a bit of information about the data behind these types of dashboards. Do you want to...
Thank you very much, Claire. Let me first start by thanking the UK and DEFRA for the event, for the invitation, and for the incredible support and being such leaders on the biodiversity front, including also in supporting your work at the OECD. Now, at the OECD, we've been tracking development finance for biodiversity for a good while, for at least 5 years, and also produced that as key inputs to the CDB, the biodiversity COP processes, notably COP 15 and 16. And the data that we have covered there includes both traditional donors as represented in the Development Assistance Committee, non-traditional donors, South-South providers, multilateral and also private philanthropy and private finance mobilized. Now, of course, that data helps monitor progress to the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework Target 19.A, and that, as you just mentioned, basically is aiming at $20 billion by 2025 and 30 by 2030. Also to say that data, the vast majority of that is available freely. It's based on a common methodology agreed by members, although we're always working to improve the data methodologies and reporting issues. And it's really, and when we talk about international cross-border public finance, it's really the only source of international comparable data, and provides quite granular and actually project level information that basically anybody can go to and have a look at. We also have compiled key evidence from that analysis in a short booklet, and this QR code will take you to that booklet if you're interested, and hope that there's a fuller report to become available soon. Now, a lot of those elements, data elements, can be found in the UK dashboard. So thanks again for making it available and showing it there as well. And let me just come back to one or two points on the data specifically that you mentioned already, Claire. I think the first good thing is really to say that financing for biodiversity or development finance for biodiversity increased from all sources from 2015 to 2023. That is also true for different perspectives. You mentioned the biodiversity related figure, which basically grew from 11 billion to 30 billion, 11 billion in 2015 to 30 billion in 2023. And that is basically if you take the full financing volume face value of an intervention that targets biodiversity, although it may also do so in targeting other objectives. Now again, with the biodiversity specific element, a component and that increased from 7.3 billion to 16.8 billion in 2023. Now if we look at that in terms of the target 19.8, it's the latest data for 2023 meant a 7 percentage point increase from the year before 2022. And so 2 years before the target, the first deadline of 2025, that leaves us 16% short. We have, I think, achieved 84%, but it leaves still 16% to be made, which hopefully we can do. We also, I think, want to say that, while we've seen really quite impressive growth over the last couple of years, there are unfortunately some headwinds ahead, because on the bilateral side, at least the international financing, development financing picture has become under pressure. So we saw a first drop in the initial figures for 2024. That is not yet reflected because these are initial figures, and we also project a further drop of 9% in 2025. The brief provides, again, fuller information on what we have seen so far up to 2023, so I invite you to go there, and then we also hope to offer in due course the full report where you can find disaggregated information by donors, sectors, region, recipient countries, policy domains. But with that, I think I'll just stop there and thank again the UK and this panel and look forward really to the collaboration on future work in this area, and to hopefully also join forces for the CBD COP in Yerevan next year. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jens. Okay. And now what do we do about this? So, Yoko Wanatabi, I wonder whether, as Director of Climate Change and Sustainable Development at Asian Development Bank, I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about the MDB's role in mobilizing more finance for nature and tracking nature finance.
Great. Thank you very much for UK Government and also TNC for organizing this event and having me here. So I represent the Asian Development Bank, and Asian Development Bank is part of the multilateral development banks around the world, and we focus as a regional development bank on Asia and the Pacific. And for supporting the government as well as private sector, working on nature and environment now is not a luxury nor addition. This is a really essential part of our investment in ensuring sustainable development in the region. And why? It is because our recent Asia-Pacific climate report, which was solely focused on unlocking nature for development, showed that in Asia and Pacific, actually 75% of our economy, our industries, and our whole activities rely on nature and natural resources. This is a really stunning number. So unless we have the nature conserved and sustainably used, our economy is doomed. So from Asian Development Bank, investing in nature is a core of our business, and we are moving forward in increasing and expanding this. And also, I want to emphasize that it is not only the Asian Development Bank who is working on this, but we have a network of MDBs We call it a MDB's Nature Group. And this is actually launched at the Glasgow COP in 26, where our MDB heads basically committed that collectively we are going to strengthen and expand our investment in nature. And again, why we invest in nature was very clear, that in order to achieve the climate change goal, nature is a basis for that. As we know, mangrove, forest, and also ocean, these are really the solutions for addressing climate, both mitigation and adaptation. So with that in mind, we have been working as collectively of MDBs. We launched this time in the COP that we came up with a taxonomy of what we mean by nature finance, because each organization in a way really struggled and tried our best to show how we're increasing nature investment, but we need coherence and we need sort of a concerted efforts on it. So we, after a year-long sort of process, we came up with a list of basically category of things that we call it nature finance. And this includes both nature positive initiative really targeted on nature conservation, but also nature mainstreaming, which is very important because the sectors that we work with, like agriculture, energy, transport, these sector type of investment really needs to incorporate nature, and we should count that sort of efforts towards nature finance as well. So that was one of the key deliverables that we did this time. And another one was a really important one, is a nature metric. So in order to, first, you need to know what we're going to invest in, but then you need to show the impact and results. So among the MDBs, we came up with a sort of set of common sort of indicators to show the results and be able to report as a collective, not only individual MDBs. So those are type of things that we're exploring. And then more, what we are trying to do is that we sort of have a more option of financial instruments. So for example, Asian Development Bank under the Nature Solutions Finance Hub, which is a 5 billion target up till 2030 to leverage both sovereign and non-sovereign resources. We are trying to originate scalable projects, but also come up with sort of a coherent set of financial instruments can be used for different contexts in different countries. So for that, last year in Asian Development Bank, we issued the first biodiversity bond of 100 million. And what is really struggling is once we issued the bond, within a month, a company in Japan, insurance company who really sees the risk these days with climate and nature loss, has invested the whole amount. And when we were discussing about it, so we just had another event with Minister on nature credit with IAPB. And I think, these are really learning from the carbon credit market. Now we can really expand to nature credit, where we can invest in biodiversity by creating a new sort of system, a market system, and also valuation of the site like wetlands and forest lands, so that we can credit those. And some of the first initiatives has been coming along. One of them are in China, in Shishui River Basin, that ADB is now setting up a localized sort of a credit system together with a national regulatory systems development. So with I think with both, developing a scalable model and bringing in the needed private capital, and a public capital can really be used as a sort of a de-risking fund to mobilize these resources, because private sector is not still ready to take that risk. And I think the public resources that we have and the bilaterals and others can really make a huge difference in moving forward. So with that sort of invention, I will look forward to the further conversation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. An inspiring story, and I hope we can see more of this type of action across the MDBs. So now we hear another perspective. Very pleased to introduce Secretary Rita Mesquita, who is the Secretary of Biodiversity, Forests and Animal Rights at the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change in Brazil. to give us a holistic view from the perspective of Brazil. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to TNC, to UK government. I totally understand that I'm walking on thin ice here as a biologist in a discussion about finance. So please bear with me and forgive me if I get too much out of what the discussion was proposed. But I must say that Brazil has been putting a big effort into creating a meaningful strategy for biodiversity conservation. And as a country that holds one of the largest biodiversity in the world, this is not a minor task. It's a huge job to do this. And Minister Marina Silva, I work with Minister Marina Silva, she always talks about environmental issues should be transversal to all the ministries. It's not specific to the Ministry of the Environment. Well, our plan for biodiversity for the country has the contributions of at least 24 ministries in the country. So there is a very good perspective that some of this finance that is increasing, and that's great, will end up in some ministry that can actually make a meaningful contribution to biodiversity through their commitments. And that's very important because it basically tells us that we have a chance of getting different worldviews to agree on joint efforts towards reaching the targets that we have proposed. And Brazil has set up some very critical targets. I mean, we have a zero deforestation target, which is, I mean, everybody can understand how huge a task that is. We have a commitment to restore 12 million hectares by 2030. And our NDC commitment is very ambitious as well. There is no doubt that nature-based solutions will help us to deliver these commitments. But I have to say, as a biologist and as Secretary of Biodiversity, I have to say that we need to have very clear indicators and monitoring of success of these increases in funding for the necessary actions. We cannot evaluate our success just by the numbers. We need to come up with critical indicators that translate where this money is going to. We have a very serious responsibility with traditional peoples of all the countries, and Brazil is no different. We have a huge proportion of people, traditional people, making very significant contributions in terms of their livelihoods, but very small proportion of the money actually reaching them. And we need to improve that. And so we need to improve how the money flows, where it has to flow, and what are the indicators of success that we are using. And finally, I have to say that economic models also need to change. You see, we still thinking economy in the old-fashioned, old ways. Economy needs to take into account the direct contributions that nature is making to their business. This needs to enter the equation not as a side effect, a collateral effect, but as part of the equations of success. And if you're not matching impact and benefits, then you should not be making money, because basically means you're not making the relevant contributions in terms of your business. And we need to improve that. I think this discussion on how we change the economies. It's going to be central, for instance, for the success of social bioeconomy, something that is getting a lot of momentum, very important, and that Brazil is paying special attention. Social bioeconomy can bring a lot of innovation to the markets, but only if it pays attention to the limits. And the limits are defined by the natural systems and by the traditional knowledge that makes use of these resources. So many times I hear we talk about biodiversity, and some people make an equate it to the carbon. But I have to say, biodiversity is not a credit. Biodiversity is an infrastructure. It's the infrastructure that sustains the complexity of all the processes that we are not paying for yet. So sustainable finance will take environmental services into account, will treat biodiversity as infrastructure, and will understand that we need to have relevant indicators so that we can then say we are making the ends meet. Otherwise, we might end up with enormous inflow of resources, but not getting the results. So that concerns me, and Brazil has been working towards diminishing the distance between investment and where the money needs to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Such incredibly important points, and I think, particularly at this COP where we've been having such trouble agreeing outcome indicators for adaptation, we really do need to also be getting clear about what we're trying to achieve with the nature finance and make sure that we're really tracking progress there and including it in our economic balance sheet. So now, it's working. I'm so excited. So Paul Oldham, who the Minister mentioned just now, who's made the first contribution to the Cali Fund, is the founder of Tierra Viva AI.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me to speak. So my name is Paul Oldham. I represent Tierra Viva AI. We are a new startup with headquarters in the UK, and we have offices and a team in Kenya. Yes, we have a Spanish name, Tierra Viva, or Terra Viva in Portuguese, and I'll come back to that at the end. So recently, as we've just heard, we became the first company to contribute to the Cali Fund under the Biodiversity Convention. So I want to kind of just explain why we did this and why more companies should contribute. So we use artificial intelligence to develop what we call biodiversity intelligence. That's using all of the new digital data on biodiversity. Unlike many companies in biotechnology and related sectors, we use digital sequence information from public databases. So as a small startup, we don't meet the contribution thresholds agreed at COP16, but we decided to make an initial contribution of $1,000 to the Cali Fund, and we're committed to contributing more as our business grows. So, why did we do this? So the UK's Dasgupta review on the economics of biodiversity made the point that nature is essential to the economy, but in conventional economic thinking, it's treated as an afterthought, something to worry about on Sunday afternoons. Now, thinking about this as a business, nature is like a forgotten employee, a long-serving worker lost in a basement or other who keeps everything running, but has dropped off the payroll due to some kind of oversight in human resources. So responsible businesses know that this has to change. So companies benefiting from digital sequence information, which, let's remind ourselves, is the fabric of life itself, have been invited to voluntarily contribute 0.1% of revenue or 1% of profit to the Cali Fund. In the UK and elsewhere, employees receive annual increments, so perhaps it's time to give nature the same, the biodiversity increments. So we have chosen to lead by example in making our contribution, but it's also important to highlight business concerns. So companies making contributions will want confidence that their money will fund real practical action on the ground, not fripperies, practical action. And that action will often be led by Indigenous peoples and local communities who are the stewards of biodiversity. However, companies will also need guidance in overcoming kind of uncertainty about how that could actually work in practice. So I think the good news is that the programme of work of the CBD subsidiary body on traditional knowledge provides a set of clear priorities for action between governments and Indigenous peoples and local communities. In addition, when we think about disbursements from the Kali Fund, the United Nations Development Programme has 30 years of experience with the Small Grants Programme, which offers a proven mechanism for transparency and accountability at the level of disbursements. So the Kali Fund establishes that at least 50% of funding will go to Indigenous peoples and local communities. Contributions from companies to the Kali Fund can be seen as part of wider global progress in tackling the chronic underfunding for the stewards of biodiversity. So this progress is also represented by the renewal of the Forest Tenure Pledge and the creation of the Tropical Forest Forever facility at COP30. So businesses also have a number of technical concerns. These include legal certainty, obligation stacking, the need for a level playing field, and positive incentives to contribute. So the Friends of the Kali Fund, led by the UK and Chile, is an important forum to address these concerns. And in thinking about these concerns, we spend a lot of our time trying to write software to solve complex challenges. And what software companies understand is that complex challenges cannot be solved all in one go. What is needed is an iterative approach. So I think addressing the technical concerns of business will best be dealt with through a process of learning by doing and practical action. So I'm confident in the near future that major firms from a number of sectors will make substantive contributions to the Kali Fund. As a small company, maybe it's just easier to go first, and we're proud to be an early contributor in breaking the ice. And our contribution proves that companies of any size, whether they're small, medium, or large, can contribute to the Kali Fund. So in the UK, I just looked it up on Companies House, there are around 1,600 active biotechnology companies. The vast majority of those will be small companies like ours. So we hope that in kind of taking this step, there will be many more companies who will join us in contributing to the Kali Fund and paying the biodiversity increment. But I wanted to end on a personal note with the origin of our company name, Tierra Viva. So as a young university student in the UK, I was inspired by the example of Chico Mendes. That led me to spend the early part of my career living and working with Indigenous peoples in Amazonia and supporting their efforts to defend their lands and environment. Now, I'm very proud that some of the people I lived and worked with from the Regional Organization of Indigenous Peoples of Amazonas, ORPIA, in Venezuela, are here at COP30 today, and I know that because I can see him, that Gregorio is sitting in the front row. So it means really a great deal to me to be able to announce the Tierra Viva contribution at a COP held in Amazonia. And finally, I wish the Brazilian presidency every success in the days to come. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And a very inspiring first mover there, and not enormously easy to hear, but we could follow the text. I'd also really take your point about this needing to be iterative learning, and I think that's absolutely fundamental as we try and really scale up what we're doing. We have time for a few interventions, and I think the first was meant to be from the Minister of Environment for Chad, but I don't think he's here, unless he's hiding behind someone. And Per Frederick Faro, also, oh, there you are, you were right in front of me. The photo I have of you looks slightly different. So let me ask you, as the Director of Department for Climate, Nature and Private Sector from Norway, for a few thoughts.
Thank you so much. Thank you for hosting this, and thanks to the panelists and the interventions. Excellent stuff. And I found it particularly encouraging that the MDBs are really getting their arms around this issue, because that is a major source of finance and, of course, influence way beyond the money in advisory roles and so on. I think from our perspective, nature and biodiversity, of course, in one sense, is a global public good from which we all benefit. So it makes sense for countries like Norway to contribute. We have chosen to do that mainly through tropical forest contributions and the Norwegian Tropical Forest Initiative, but also on the oceans front, two of the main ecosystems that sustain the biodiversity of this planet. On the other hand, biodiversity is also clearly underexplored as a source of commercial value, and I think the bioeconomy potential is really where part of the answer lies for the future. Again, compliments to the government of Brazil for the bioeconomy plan, which is a very impressive piece of work. Look forward to seeing how that evolves over time. And then lastly, of course, though nature is a public good, we just heard perspectives from the initial contributor, but it's really a fact that so many companies make a lot of money based on the value of biodiversity. And it is therefore absolutely reasonable that they pay something back, which is the reason why Norway has contributed and will continue to contribute to both the design and the capitalization and the creation of the Kali Fund. It's really good news that we have a first contribution, and then I think we should all start to put pressure on our respective private sectors to contribute at scale, because their future returns are really dependent on the protection of these biomes and this biodiversity. So it is also in their self-interest. Obviously a free rider problem, but that's exactly what we tried to get at by creating the Kali Fund. So a big step forward. It will be interesting to see how it will evolve. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now Gregorio Mirabel, the climate coordinator for COICA.
Hi. Bueno, en primer lugar, agradecer al pabellón del Reino Unido, del país del Reino Unido, por este conversatorio.
First, I want to say thank you to the UK Pavilion for this conversation and this opportunity.
También a todos los países que están presentes, a los hermanos y hermanas.
Also for all the brothers and sisters, all the countries that are here.
Nuestra presencia aquí como COICA es porque queremos que el Fondo de Cali se fortalezca.
Our presence here as a COICA, the main indigenous body, is because we are interested to get a strong commitment around the Cali Fund.
Porque la biodiversidad de la selva amazónica está ligada a los conocimientos de nuestros pueblos.
Because the biodiversity in the Amazon jungle is tied totally to the traditional knowledge.
Nuestra sabiduría y nuestra forma de conservar los bosques tiene que ser protegida en el Fondo de Cali.
Our wisdom has to be protected as a part of the Cali Fund.
Y queríamos resaltar el apoyo que ha dado el hermano Paul Olhan y su pequeña empresa para animar a los gobiernos, para animar a las empresas grandes a que vean esta posibilidad de que el Fondo de Cali sea una gran oportunidad para evitar el punto de no retorno, para fortalecer a los pueblos indígenas amazónicos y que haya una Amazonía viva. Gracias.
I want to say thank you, our brother Paul, that's supporting the fund. And this is a good example to avoid the tipping point and also keeping the forest alive for our life, for the life of the planet.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to have you having the last word, because I think this is the negotiations. People get pulled into 1,000 things, and I think our final intervention isn't in the room. So I just want to thank my panelists again, and our interventions from the audience, as well as Paul from, this is the first time that we've had a virtual person actually join and the tech work, so that was a very exciting moment for me. And thank you all for coming and joining this discussion, and I hope we can continue this conversation and really understand how we can pull together that biodiversity finance with the climate finance to deliver behind big outcomes and be really clear what those outcomes are and get it better recognized in our economic models and more finance flowing to our forest stewards. So many thanks to all of you for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the COP.